This video is sponsored by the book summary and discovery app, Blinkist. Use the link in the description and receive 40% off Blinkist Premium. You're a construction worker. You're working a job with a crew of 6, building a small railroad station. You've been on the job for several days. By the end of the day today, you'll be done. You're excited to go home and enjoy a couple days off with your friends and family. Everything is going normally, beginning to wrap up, when suddenly, you hear a loud crack. A pillar on the front of the station is broken, causing the station's roof to collapse sideways, pulling the rest of the building's infrastructure out and toward you. You try to get out of the way, but you can't. You and 4 coworkers become pinned on the train tracks by the debris. You can't barely move. You try to maintain your composure, but the feeling of panic begins to set in, quickly exasperated by the bellowing yells of your coworkers. Some of them are injured. You become confused when suddenly their yells go quiet. There's a vibrational hum in the distance that replaces them. Then, a train horn. The yells pick back up, now change from the sound of pain to the sound of terror. Closer and closer, you hear and feel the train come. This is it, you think to yourself. You hear one of your coworkers yelling, "Switch the track! Switch the track!" You remember there's a manned control booth on the bridge about 40 yards behind you. Inside, the attendant can push a button that will switch the tracks and divert the train away right before it hits you. You join in on the now collective chant to change the tracks. After a moment passes, you hear someone else yelling near you, but not with you. It's your other coworker and good friend. He is pinned on the other track. The person in the control booth sees what's happening. They saw the whole thing and called for help immediately, but it won't get here in time. They watch the oncoming train get closer and closer. They have a decision to make. Choose to switch the track and have the train kill 1 person, or do nothing and let the train kill a total of 5 people. You feel the vibration of the train increase as you consider your whole life, a tapestry of experiences and feelings, relationships and achievements, desires and hopes. You plead for it to continue. You don't want to die. No one here does. The person in the booth is thinking intensely about what to do. They have about 5 seconds to decide. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This dilemma is a version of the thought experiment known as the trolley problem. Originally posed by philosopher Philippa Foot in 1967 and later advanced in 1976 by Judith Jarvis Thomson, the trolley problem has become an increasingly popular and sometimes comical category of thought experiments that challenge our most basic moral intuitions and show us how unclear questions about ethics and decision-making can easily become. To explore this further, imagine for a moment now that you are the one in the control booth. What would you do? Would you do nothing, avoiding involving yourself, but allowing 5 people to die that you could have otherwise easily saved? Or would you switch the tracks and, in some sense, cause 1 person to die, but save the other 5? For most people, the choice is clear enough. In a variety of different surveys, about 90% of respondents claim that in this situation, they would flip the switch and divert the train. After all, 5 people dying is worse than 1, and most people want to do the least worst thing. This way of thinking follows from one of the most influential and commonly held ethical theories known as utilitarianism, originally developed in the 18th century, which describes decisions and actions as moral when their outcomes result in the greatest amount of good, pleasure, happiness, or well-being, and the minimal amount of bad, pain, or suffering. Alternatively, however, people who disagree with this choice might follow the ethical theory known as deontology, which argues that decisions and actions are moral solely based on whether or not they follow defined rules and principles, and not based on their consequences. In other words, for example, the act of killing someone under any circumstances, even if by not killing them you are essentially killing more people, is and will always be wrong on principle. And therefore, since flipping the switch involves you committing the act of killing someone, doing so is morally wrong. However, this raises the following question. What is the difference between allowing and causing? Is there any? By simply observing the event, understanding it, and possessing the ability to easily change and improve it, are you not already involved? Is there a difference in involvement between observation and inaction versus observation and action? Isn't choosing to not be involved a choice that is already involved? No one can choose to not choose, and no one can opt out of what they are already a part of. What if there was no one on the other track? Wouldn't allowing the 5 people to die clearly be the wrong thing to do? Even at this level, in just the original basic version, clearly, it isn't 100% obvious what is right and how we ought to treat the situation, and it only gets far less obvious with subtle changes. What if we change the numbers? What if there are 50 people on the main track and 10 on the other? How about 5,000 on the main track and 1,000 on the other? Now, if you switch the tracks, you will direct the death of 1,000 people, but you will also save 5,000. The proportions are exactly the same as the original, and therefore, the logic should also be the same. But it seems to feel a lot different knowing that you will at least be partly responsible for the death of 1,000 people. What if we change the proportions now? On the main track, there are 5 people. On the other, there are 2. How about 3 on the other? Or 4? Again, from a purely utilitarian and seemingly rational perspective, 4 is still less bad than 5, and so, switching the tracks is still seemingly the right choice. But yet, there almost seems to be a point at which the difference in people between the tracks feels more negligible than the intervention itself. Is saving one more person worth the weight of responsibility you will feel in that decision? What about your own personal suffering and trauma as a result of this? How do we weigh that against the delta of one person's life? Now, let's make it even harder. What if there are 5 people on the main track and only 1 on the other? But the 1 is someone you love. A family member, a partner, a friend, a child. What do you do then? Your impulse is most likely not to switch the tracks. That is, of course, very understandable. But is it right? If, in the original version, you believe you should switch the tracks, the only difference here is your emotional attachment to the one person. But the morality and logic of the situation does not change otherwise. Even if in the original version you believe you should not switch the tracks, just put your loved one in the group of 5 on the main track and consider the same problem. Is your emotional involvement enough to compromise your morality? Presumably, the majority of people would say yes and do the same. But then, we would have to also agree that morality is flexible based on our emotions and not based on our consistency of logic. How much of ethics is really just emotion anyway? The meta-ethical theory known as emotivism argues that ethical statements never express truths or falsehoods, but rather merely our emotional states, influenced by things like our cultural and experiential backgrounds, moods, personalities, and so on. If this is true, how does that affect things in general? Let's return to the bridge in the original example. Again, 5 people are stuck on the train tracks and a small train is coming. This time, however, there is no control booth, button, switch, or any second track at all. You are just a random pedestrian watching the event unfold from the bridge. Near you, however, at the edge of the bridge, stands a large man, also observing the event unfold. He is massive, morbidly obese. You don't know any of the people on the track, you don't know the obese man, but you do know that if you push the man off the bridge in front of the train, he will cause the train to stop in time, killing him, but saving the other 5 people. Do you do it? In the same surveys mentioned earlier, where 90% of respondents claim that they would switch the track by a lever or button, less than 10% claim that they would push the man off the bridge. But yet, it's the same outcome, same number of people, same relationship with the people involved, and so on. Everything else is exactly the same. Neither the man on the alternative track in the original scenario, nor the man on the bridge in this scenario, chose to be in the situation. This obese man is no more or less involved in the unfolding of events, and they would both be just as safe if you weren't there. But yet, you likely feel differently in this situation, simply because it feels more personal. Emotionally, you are affected enough to not do what you already, likely, agreed was logical and moral. For one last twist, let's imagine a different person is in the same situation on the bridge, making the decision of whether or not to push the man. This person, however, is psychopathic, and they choose to do whatever you chose to do, but they do it because they want to feel personally involved in killing someone, or they want to see more people die. In either case, does their intention change the morality of the situation? Would they be more or less moral than someone who chooses to do the opposite if the psychopath's actions result in the same outcome of what you believe is most moral? Taking the utilitarian view, the psychopathic person would have done the more moral thing, but who would you want to be alone in a room with? Let's say that they did do the more moral thing, but they are an immoral person, justifiably worth condemning. But what happens if 6 weeks later, they go to a neurologist after having experienced months of chronic headaches, and it is discovered that they have a tumor in their brain that has caused brain lesions in areas responsible for morality and value-based decision-making? The tumor has directly caused their behavior and decision-making to change in ways that they had no control over. How do we perceive them now? Are they morally responsible for their behavior? What if the same person didn't have a tumor, but was horribly abused psychologically and physically as a child, which directly caused a response that led to this behavior? They would not have chosen or controlled this any more than a tumor. Is there a difference? Is anyone truly morally responsible for who they become and the choices they are led to make if they are by causes they never chose or controlled to begin with? Of course, the individual still needs to be dealt with and taken out of society, rehabilitated if possible, but just because you can't take the tumor out does not make the person any less of a victim. Ultimately, the trolley problems aren't just interesting thought experiments and goofy memes. They show us that what we think is right or wrong is often based on a lot more than just rational evaluations of pros and cons, good and bad. They reveal to us that decisions and actions are often a consequence of a complex array of intentions and beliefs, all puppeteered by a backstory of cause and effect in a chaotic system comprised of incalculable variables. The point of these questions isn't to trick the mind, but to demonstrate just how complicated and unclear matters of ethical decision-making sometimes are and can be. Right now, in this moment of history, we are entering new realms of moral understanding and new conditions of societal reality. What rights might we owe our animal cousins? How should we program AI, self-driving vehicles, and other technologies to make decisions on their own about things like, for example, whether or not a self-driving car should hit one person in order to avoid 5? How should we choose when all choices are bad? How will we? How should we update laws and justice systems and punishments as we venture out further into these new realms of understanding and society? In the words of Peter Singer, what one generation finds ridiculous, the next accepts, and the third shudders when it looks back on what the first did. It is both a wonder and an incredible feat that we have come as far as we have as a society and as a species. To understand and agree, at scale, what it means to at least try to be moral and to do our very best every day to behave accordingly, to uphold peace and order and reason and understanding. Of course, there's so much chaos, disdain, and misalignment in the world. Our immorality is always lurking in each moment and each stage of history. But there's also so much compassion, so much kindness, and desire to treat other people and things right as best we can. We have come so far. We must not forget this. But we have so much farther still to go. We must not forget this either. This video was sponsored by Blinkist. A much easier trolley problem is the following. You're on a train going down a track. You can either do nothing and everything stays the same, or you can push a button and divert the train onto a second track that quickly leads to a ton of new, exciting, and useful perspectives and understandings. This button, of course, is real, and you can push it by clicking the link to Blinkist in the description. Blinkist is an app that helps you significantly develop, accelerate, and enhance your reading and learning by condensing over 5,500 of the best nonfiction books and podcasts across 27 different categories into around 15-minute explainers that can be both read or listened to, even while offline. No matter who you are and what track you want to go down this new year, Blinkist's tailored content and exclusive personality-driven experiences ensure that the track you go down gets you to exactly where you want to go. If you want to be a better critical thinker, Blinkist has a great curated collection called Critical Thinking Skills in 7 Days, which will teach you how to better evaluate information, deal with external and internal deceptions, and ultimately make better decisions. In particular, The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking by Edward B. Berger and Michael Starbird is a great title to learn and develop key strategies toward improving your thinking process and enacting positive changes both in your life and in particular fields of interest. And now, through Blinkist Connect, premium users can also share their account with one other person at no additional cost. Enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1, a 7-day free trial, and 40% off Blinkist Premium by clicking the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on the screen. 40% off is only valid until the end of February. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.